Welcome to The Impossible, where we empower others to face the impossible, inspire them to be impossible, and motivate them to do the impossible. As so many of you know, this platform, this mission, this mindset, this vision that has ultimately grown to become an all-consuming, fiery, passionate purpose for both Austin and myself. It began many years ago now. It began back in 2013 when I was initially diagnosed with Ewing sarcoma, a very rare, very aggressive form of pediatric bone cancer. I was 18 years old. I was a senior in high school. And it changed the trajectory of my life from that moment on. And while there was certainly a lot of hardship, a lot of challenge, a lot of impossible that I had to overcome in that time, and that's really where a lot of this message was born. It was also the most transformative, educational, influential, impactful periods of my life. It was the period in which the be impossible mindset was born. Because I didn't know how to beat cancer. I didn't know how to overcome these things like amputation and chemotherapy and wondering if I would even live out the next year. And so I thought, what if I don't focus on beating these things? Because that seems immense. That seems impossible. But rather, what if I just focus on building the version of myself who can? The version of myself who can show up every single day, working a little bit closer toward that goal. How would he think? How would he act? How would he feel? How would he eat? How would he sleep? How would he dress? What were his habits? What were his values? What would be his purpose in life? If I could design that individual and then work to become that individual every single day to the highest level of my ability, then maybe I can become that individual who can beat cancer. Just maybe I can become something, someone who is impossible. And that's exactly what I did. And when I found that potential within myself, I realized, you know what, this came from me. I'm nothing special. I'm nobody unique. But there is something massively unique, massively special about the human spirit. And in those days, I realized that what I found along this journey, this message, this mission, this mindset that I'd built, what I found during that time is accessible to every single person. And once adopted, once implemented, once utilized, you can use it to overcome any impossible challenge. You can use it to build a version of yourself who could not or should not otherwise have existed without that challenge. And in doing so, you set yourself up for even greater success in the future. Because once you've built an impossible version of yourself one time, then you can do it again and again and again. And each impossible is that much greater. Each mountain that much more insurmountable. And every time you do this, you build up more and more and more proof. Not to society, not to Instagram, but to yourself of exactly who you are and who you can become. I've been blessed to face the impossible many times along this journey. Some chosen, many unchosen. Things like chemotherapy, things like amputation, Things like GI bleeds and bowel obstructions that led to surgeries of rebuilding my abdominal core, taking on challenges like deadlifting and squatting over 500 pounds in competition as an amputee, running marathons, building businesses, building platforms, all with the exact same approach, all with the exact same strategy, never knowing exactly what that process looked like, but being able to build up enough unruly faith in my own potential to become someone who could. And I built up that faith through those very initial days, battling cancer as a scared, nearly beaten, nearly broken child. But a child who had a spirit that could not, would not give in, would not give up, was willing to show up no matter what it took to become that version, that impossible version of himself he knew that he could be. And I am once again in that very same position. I'm much older now, much more experienced, been fortunate enough to have grown immensely through the influence and the actions of so many others around me and my own pursuits toward the impossible. And now I am once again staring cancer in the face. And it's never easy to hear those words, "You have cancer." It's never going to be a routine thing to face, no matter how used to it you may get. It is always going to shake you to the core of your being. It is always going to cause you to question. It is always going to cause you to doubt. It is always going to cause you to want to give into the situation, to want to give up entirely. But the reason we put forth this message that we do and the mission and vision we have at Impossible Performance is because when this becomes a regular practice and a regular discipline for your life, this constant pursuit of the impossible that we reference so much, when that becomes true, you build a skill of facing these impossible challenges in life so that you can take these challenges that come up, and rather than just see them as a challenge that's going to break you down or tear you down or beat you into nothing, you more quickly see it for the inherent opportunity it holds. We never want to have to face these challenges. We never want to have to face cancer. We never want to have to be in these unchosen, impossible circumstances, but they are going to happen. They're going to happen to you. They're going to happen to me. They're going to happen to every single one of us throughout the course of our lifetimes. If you have not already been in this place, at some point in your life, you will face something that feels completely and totally impossible. And that's okay. Because there exists within life the opportunity to establish being impossible as a practice, as a skill that can be built. So when you hear those words, "you have cancer," you can bridge that gap more quickly from "how is this happening?" to "what am I going to do about it?" I heard those words again a little more than a week ago. There was suspicion now for a couple months. We've been getting imaging, collecting data, getting opinions from different physicians, and finally we got the news last Friday. You have cancer. And upon hearing that, it did cause that same numbness, that same questioning, that same fear, that same doubt of, what am I going to do? I have so much going on right now. I have a young daughter who depends on me. I have a family who depends on me. I have an unborn son on the way. And those questions are normal and they're natural. And it's okay to ask those questions. In fact, I would say it's even good because it holds up a very stark reflection of how much beauty, how much wonder, how much importance there is for your life, should you choose to see it that way. And in those moments of questioning, of numbness, of uncertainty, of doubt, of fear, I inherently go back to those skills, those practices I've spent my lifetime since my original diagnosis building. You see, things like the 500-pound squat was never about the squat. It was never about the weight. It was about putting myself in an extremely vulnerable, controlled situation where I felt immense, paralyzing fear. Fear that I did not know how to cope with. And yet, week after week, year after year, I learned to build peace within that fear. Never to turn the fear off, never to escape it. Our emotions are things that should never just be switched on and switched off like a light. There's such a beautiful complexity to human emotion. And as terrifying as it can be, it can fuel so much good, so much influence in your life. And so we need to be able to embrace the entire spectrum and learn how to control ourselves within it, and then use that emotion toward a positive outcome. And just like going through cancer initially, running through marathons, the thousands of reps I completed on a squat bar under weight that felt as if it would crush me, I've been able to build a tremendous amount of peace within fear. And that's a skill that serves me nearly every day and is especially serving me right now. And I don't mean it to sound as if I'm just totally okay with the fact that I have cancer and that it's no big deal and that it's not bothering me at all, because that couldn't be further from the truth. But rather, it allows me to shift my perspective from seeing this as something that is just distinctly happening to me outside of my control entirely, to a perspective of which this is something that's happening and I get to decide what I'm going to do with it. And for me, I am far too long down this journey to waste any more time than is necessary between that space of questioning and the space of action. And so that's exactly what I'm dedicating myself to doing. Taking as much action around this diagnosis as I possibly can, so that I can find as much opportunity within it and create as much good from it. Because as we talked about on the podcast so many times, there's some things in life that are so horrible, so awful, you'll never be grateful it happened. I'm never going to be grateful I lost my leg, even though it is one of the circumstances that led to me being stronger than I ever would have been without it. It's not something I feel happy about. But it is something I can always create good from. And cancer is no different. So, because of you guys listening and the platform you've helped us build and the influence you've helped us build with Impossible Performance, I owe it to you just as much as I owe it to myself and my loved ones to bring forth the highest amount of peace I can within this fear. Take hold of the opportunity within it. And most importantly, bring as much good out of it as I possibly can. And we're going to be covering a lot of different information, a lot of different topics, a lot of different thoughts. We're going to try to display this process that we preach about all the time. We're going to live this in real life for you guys to show you a direct example of what it looks like and what it can mean to be impossible. And it starts here. So, I have been diagnosed with what is called renal cell carcinoma. It is a kidney cancer, and from my own personal understanding and research of it, it's a cancer that can grow quite slowly for quite a long time. It can lay dormant for a very long time, very slowly growing. There's a chance that this may have been developing for years. And then all of a sudden it stops growing so slowly and starts growing more quickly, which it now has done. I'm incredibly fortunate that we caught it very, very early. I had a GI bleed earlier this year in June, a GI bleed that still has no medical explanation behind it as to why it even happened. It was very severe, very intense, required a lot of imaging surrounding it, yet we never found a good cause for the bleed. But as unfortunate as that circumstance was to go through, because of that imaging, because of that bleed, because of that hospital admission, we found this cancer, and we found it very early. And that's extremely important because I'm stage 1 right now, meaning that we can cure this cancer with just surgery. No chemotherapy, no radiation, just a surgical procedure. Because when this cancer starts spreading and becomes metastatic, it can become very dangerous and very deadly. It's highly resistant to all forms of chemotherapy, so it's very hard to kill. But in isolation, it can be removed and eradicated from the body. And fortunately, that's what my prognosis seems to be. So, as we understand it right now, I have stage 1 renal cell carcinoma, kidney cancer. And we have a surgical consult coming up this week where I'll learn a lot more information, which I will communicate to you guys as far as what this process is going to look like and what exactly is going to need to be done. But very likely it sounds like I'm going to have either part or all of my kidney removed on the right side. And fortunately, we have 2 kidneys, and either the partial kidney that's left over or if it's totally removed, the other kidney will be able to take over and maintain that function that I need. And with that surgery, we can remove the cancer, and I should be able to have a 95% chance of a 5-year survival rate without the cancer coming back. Now, in the world of cancer, these are very good odds. And they're odds I'm very thankful for. And I can't help but feel that this diagnosis is so much different from my diagnosis in 2013, when there was so much fear, so much uncertainty, so much brutality to the treatment. But it's interesting how it still causes those same emotions. For anybody ever affected by cancer, I think that's probably something we never totally escape, never something we totally remove ourselves from. That fear, that numbness, that unknowing, that uncertainty, even when it seems the prognosis is so good. Because there's always that chance. There's always that chance that something can go catastrophically wrong. And I do not take that lightly. And I also try to not take lightly the fact that this is always true. At any point in our lives, something can go catastrophically wrong. And it highlights and signifies to me why our time is so infinitely precious and should be treated as such. I think we have developed a culture and a society these days where we throw away a lot of time. We generate a lot of indifference toward it. In fact, sometimes we even allow ourselves to get bored, wishing time would pass by more quickly. But time is what holds our potential. It's the one resource we can never create more of and never know how much of it we even have to begin with. And while there must be a balance established between, short-term versus long-term versus right now acquisition and spending of that time, we always need to make sure that that time is being spent in a way that aligns with our priorities, aligns with our passion, aligns with our purpose, and ultimately aligns with our mission and vision for the work we are here to do. And if you're sitting there and feeling like you are not important enough of a person to view your time, your life, your circumstances in that type of capacity, you are wrong. Not everybody has to go out and change the world. Not everybody has to go out and do the grand, amazing things, quote unquote, that we see on social media. But everybody, every single one of you, should have a purpose for your life. A purpose that is fueled by a fiery passion that makes you want to get up every single day and work toward that outcome with the highest level of your ability. Because whether ultimately that mission and vision is simply to serve yourself or to serve your family or your community, no matter what the reach of it is, the impact can always be just as deep. If your life serves to change, influence, inspire one other life, then you've succeeded. You get to decide the terms and conditions. But what we cannot allow to happen is we cannot allow ourselves to fall into a place of stagnation where we aimlessly drift through life, waiting for it to happen to us. Because when we develop that as our default mindset, when we develop that as our default condition, as our operating system for life, then we give up our life. We give up the potential that we hold. We give up the precious time that we are given. There's so much beauty in life. And yet, it's so easy to become blind to it. But I think we are most profoundly awakened to that beauty in the moments where we are forced to come face to face with our own mortality. Even myself, having lived through many near-death experiences now, I fall into this trap. I'm not immune to it, of getting so caught up in the busyness and the speed of which life can pass by that I don't stop to appreciate those moments of wonder, the beauty of nature, my daughter's smile, the feeling of a good training session, or the taste of a good meal. But that's been one of the most profound realizations of this diagnosis, and one I'm quite thankful for. I've been given an opportunity to have a reawakening, have my eyes reopened to the beauty that exists within life. And while it doesn't make it okay that I have cancer, it does bring another level to that peace that I'm working to build in the face of this fear. And I think a lot of people are going to look at the message we put out on social media, or even the message coming from this podcast today, and they're going to think, how does he do that? How does he get diagnosed with cancer and he just seems to be okay? It's not stopping him in his tracks. It's not totally derailing him. It's not making him angry or upset or hateful or spiteful toward the world. And again, I would say I'm not immune to those things. But what I have done is I have dedicated my life to building up the skill of being able to take on these challenges, to face these impossible circumstances in life. And I have said it before and I will say it again. You have that same potential. You have that same skill fully, totally, and completely accessible to you right now. And it all comes down to a choice. Am I going to let this situation happen to me? Let it take me, let it consume me, let it control me? Or am I going to sit within it? Am I going to work, no matter how hard it may be, to find just one thing I can do to build a version of myself every day, just one thing, who could find peace in this challenge? And again, never that you have to be grateful for it. You can stay angry at it. Use that anger. That can be fuel. But can you build peace within it and acceptance and knowing that this is a situation that is happening in my life and I'm going to be okay with it? And I'm going to be okay with it because I know what I can do with it. I know what I'm going to do with it. I am going to bring so much immense good from this situation that the bad that comes from it will be completely rendered irrelevant. When you can view the impossible challenges in life in that light, in that manner, I personally have never felt a more motivating, more driving force. And so I don't have the fancy one-liner for social media that can give you the answer to how you face an impossible challenge and just immediately flip that switch to be able to overcome it and start moving forward in a different direction. But I do think the best thing that any of us can do when faced with these challenges in life, and the one thing I've been focusing on doing, especially while I'm kind of in this latency period of waiting for the next appointment, is just to simply pause, to step back from the scenario for a moment, to reflect upon it, to pay attention to it, to ask that question: is this something I'm going to allow to happen to myself, or is this something that I can take active control over, even if it's only over myself, even if I can only control my own actions, even if I can only control how I show up to those I interact with, even if I can only control my demeanor as I'm wheeled down that surgical hall, how I control how I speak to the doctors and the nurses and the surgeons who will be operating on me. If you can control those minute details, you start to control how that situation is impacting you and how it is impacting those around you. And those are the very first steps toward becoming impossible, toward building that version of yourself who could not or should not otherwise have existed without this challenge you face. And while it kills me and it pains me to say that I once again have cancer. I know, because I've done it before and I know I will do it again, that I will use this opportunity to create yet another impossible version of myself. It is my distinct calling in life. It is the thing I am most passionate about in helping others realize within themselves. And it is the purpose as to why I am here. And I'm going to close today by sharing a story with you guys. A story I honestly was never sure that I would share on this platform. Not because I'm ashamed of it or embarrassed by it, or because I think it's something that needs hidden or shouldn't be heard, but simply because it is maybe the most deeply personal experience I have. And I never knew if it was something that could be or should be shared with the world. But as I come face to face once again with my own mortality, as I said earlier, sometimes it lifts that veil from our eyes and allows us to see those very most beautiful moments of life, and to even see those moments beyond this life. And so I'll preface with the story I'm about to tell is my own personal understanding and perception of that reality as I experienced it. Nothing more and nothing less. It is not augmented or enhanced to make it more exciting or more fear-inducing in any particular way. It is just the story of the most real thing I've ever experienced, exactly as I experienced it. And I think it will shed some light into not just why we do what we do, but how we are able to show up every single day with the passion, the purpose, the commitment that we do. So to take it back to 2013, during my initial battle with cancer, again, a infinitely more brutal, more terrifying, more savage, and more severe battle with cancer. After I'd gone through the 9 months of chemotherapy, after I'd lost my leg, when my body was completely beaten and broken, I had no immune system left, I had no energy left, I barely had a spirit left within me. I received what should have been my final dose of chemotherapy. Well, it was my final dose of chemotherapy. But after which I was supposed to be done, be on the road to healing and recovery. And instead, it took my life from me. I remember watching the last remnants of that final dose enter my bloodstream. I remember leaving the hospital in hesitant relief, thinking that maybe the suffering would be over once I recovered. And then I remember the next days waking up more sick, more broken than I'd ever been. I remember collapsing as I'm crutching back to bed to try to get rest, unable to hydrate my body, unable to even stay conscious. I remember the EMS team showing up, yelling my name, trying to bring me back to consciousness. I remember my body projectile vomiting in the ER, thick black blood that indicated something was very seriously wrong. I remember the shaky, harrowing helicopter ride to Nationwide Children's Hospital as I was life-flighted in a fleeting attempt to save my life. I remember those helicopter doors opening as it landed on the rooftop of that hospital, and I remember the cool, crisp, late October air touching my face for what I feared might be the last time. I remember being wheeled through the elevator doors and the very quick plummet down to the bottom floor where the emergency room surgical suite awaits. I remember being hoisted onto a table, and the only thing I can feel is an extreme, immense thirst for water, for ice, for anything to soothe my throat, which was on fire. I remember the massive crowd of doctors and nurses as they flurried around me, trying to place IVs into veins that were so diminished they would not hold. I remember looking up and seeing loved ones' faces completely white, completely stark with fear. And then I remember the blackness. And I won't go through the full detail of what ensued for that time period thereafter. But the only way I can interpret it is I entered a realm of extreme pain, extreme suffering, of nothing but death. It was more vivid and more real and more terrifying than anything I've experienced in my life. But partway through that experience, I came to a different space. I was pulled out of that dark world and entered into a different space. A world of pure white, of beauty, of nature, of crisp, cool, fresh snowfall air. And upon entering that realm, I felt more alive, more at peace, more in love than I ever had to that point. And in that space, there were 3 beings. They didn't have shapes, they didn't have forms, they were barely even distinct. But I recognized them only as God Himself. And we communicated. Not through words, not through touch, not through thoughts, but purely through an exchange of emotion that ebbed and flowed back and forth as if it was water on a beach. And He knew and felt everything I knew and felt, and I likewise knew and felt the same within Him. And I never wanted to be anywhere else for the rest of any existence I had than in that place. the first time I had known peace in nearly a year. But in that ebb and flow of emotional communication, it was very apparent that I was given a choice. I was given a choice to remain there if I wanted, and I very much wanted to. But I was also given a choice to come back. And there was no directive within that choice, but I could feel it inherent that to come back meant that there was work to be done. Work that could be done, work that should be done, work that would be done. And as much as that was the choice I did not want to make, I could feel that that was the choice he wanted. And because I could feel that, it made every desire of my own seem irrelevant in comparison. And so I came back. Back into that dark, terrifying world at first, and later into reality as we know it now. And even now, more than a decade later, those memories of that experience sit with me, again, more real than anything else I've ever experienced in life. I still don't know how to put the exact words around it, the exact frameworks, the exact ideas. And honestly, at this point, I've stopped trying because it's not the point. And I know that there are many who will try to put their truths and their confirmations around that story, and then that's perfectly fine. But I have my own understanding of it. And that is that I don't need a story around it. I don't need an explanation for it. I need only that connection, that relationship, that perception of reality as I know it. And I need only to remember that flow of emotion, to know that this is the work I returned to do, and that every beautiful and terrible moment of life since then is all a collective part of that work, and that this cancer diagnosis is another part of that work. And so, impossible as it is to face, it is just a part of the work I am so grateful to be here to do. I am blessed every morning to wake up to the smile of my daughter and my wife, and the knowledge of my now unborn son, who will be arriving in January. And I take an incredible amount of peace in knowing that my future lives in their eyes. I have no plans on being even remotely close to done with the work I am here to do. In fact, I still feel as if we're just to the beginning. But I do know, because anything can happen along this journey, I do know that even if this work ended tomorrow and I went back to that place from which I never wanted to leave? I do know that my spirit, this work, this message, this passion, this purpose, this mission, and this vision we've built with Impossible Performance will live on with them and so many others. And it is a distinct honor of my life to live with the knowledge of that truth in my heart. We are not done. This is yet another impossible, another challenge through which we will find opportunity, and we will create so much good from it. And I just want to say thank you to everyone who has been a part of it and who will be a part of it going forward into the future. You guys are the reason we do everything we do. Because Austin and I both know through our own battles that this spirit, this practice, this skill, this being impossible that we have built within ourselves is accessible to every single individual. I know it isn't within you because I found it in myself. And so if you are facing something that seems impossible, I urge you to take that pause, to step back, to ask yourself that question. Is this something happening to me, or is this something with which I can build peace and use it to grow and build myself and subsequently build and grow those around me, to create so much good that the bad of this situation is deemed irrelevant? And that's exactly what I intend to do with this new cancer diagnosis. And it is exactly what I intend to do with every challenge I face for the rest of my life until I die. So I guess in light of that story, I mostly see this diagnosis, hard as it is to take on, I see it as just another piece of the work I came back to do. And it is work I am ready for. It is work I am thankful for, and work I will give the very highest of myself to. And I would simply ask that you all help join us on this journey. We don't need you to buy any fancy products. We don't need you to listen to any advertisements. That's never been the point of this platform. But if you want to help us spread this mission and this vision we have for our work at Impossible Performance, the number one thing you can do is copy the link to this episode, paste it into a text message, an email, a social media post, and share it with as many people as you know. It may seem as if you doing that is insignificant, but it changes the course of this message. It allows it to reach the people who need to hear it the very most. And you doing that may just give somebody the message they need in their darkest hour. So please join us in sharing this message, living out this mission, and ultimately helping us to realize this vision. Because at Impossible Performance, we are striving to build a global culture of strength, fostering a spirit of growth in constant pursuit of the impossible. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Thank you for being a part of this journey. Thank you for being a part of this work we are here to do, and which we will always do. And as always, be impossible.